Today's story comes straight from the heart of Chicago, a place once called Weg City, in a neighborhood known as Parkway Gardens. But after the tragic death of O.D. Perry in 2011, everything changed. The streets that once echoed with everyday life were renamed by the people who lived there. From that day on, they called it O Block, in his memory. After O.D. Perry's death in 2011, things on the south side of Chicago changed fast. The tension that had been building for years finally exploded. Two rival groups, Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples, were now locked in a dangerous street war. What had once been a quiet rivalry turned into open conflict. Streets that were already tough became battlegrounds. The violence between Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples kept getting worse. What started as neighborhood beef turned into a wave of shootings, revenge, and tragedy that spread across the south side of Chicago. The number of murders and gun violence rose so high that people began calling the city Chirac, a mix of Chicago and Iraq. Why that name? Because the death toll in some neighborhoods was compared to war zones. Streets felt like battlefields, and fear became part of everyday life. In the middle of the war on O Block, the name King Von was always heard at the front line. He lived through the chaos, and later turned those real stories into music. Von built a successful career, not just from talent, but from pain, loyalty, and truth. But he was never alone. His childhood friend T.Roy was always right by his side, through everything. Those moments, that bond, and the streets they came from shaped his voice, a voice that the world would soon hear. T.Roy, just like King Von, had a list of alleged killings connected to his name. He got his nickname T.Roy from the word iris, which means foot soldier. T.Roy had 4 brothers and 1 sister, and they were all born in O Block. After the death of O.D. Perry and Patton, the war between the GDs and BDs intensified. And T.Roy started his activity alongside his other friends like King Von inside O Block. He became known as one of the most dangerous shooters of O Block. Everything started with the death of Dale Fisher, who was shot 12 times. Dale Fisher had a lot of friends on 63rd Street, STL and 64 EBT. There were also groups called FBG and FYB that were active in that area. Dale Fisher's older brother was the main person responsible for the death of O.D. Perry. Even O.D. Perry's mother said she heard that her son was killed by someone named Main. So, it can be said that Dale Fisher's death was revenge for O.D. Perry's death. No one was ever arrested as the killer of Dale Fisher. But FBG Buta, a member of the Gangster Disciples and a friend of Fisher from the same neighborhood, told investigators that he was sure his friend Dale Fisher was killed by T.Roy. This was the beginning of a story that felt like a movie, but it was real, about 2 of Chicago's most notorious street killers, T.Roy and his best friend King Von. In 2012, King Von started his Twitter account and shared news about his street activities with his best friend T.Roy. He posted things like how they would shoot at others as if nothing had happened. The next murder report goes back to August 8, 2012, when Dirty Rell's body was found in the middle of the street. After being taken to the hospital, he died at 4 a.m. Dirty Rell was one of the older members of STL, and as a part of the Gangster Disciples, he was considered a major target for the members of O Block. A few hours before Dirty Rell was killed, King Von tweeted, "Smell of a murder in the air." A few hours after Dirty Rell's death, he tweeted again, "Go to sleep." As I said, Dirty Rell was one of the main members of STL, and there was no way his death would go unanswered. The day after Dirty Rell's death, White, a friend of Von and T.Roy, was killed in retaliation. He was killed by a man named 50 Shot, a member of STL. A few hours after the shooting, 50 Shot was arrested. In 2023, after 10 years, 50 Shot was sentenced to 115 years in prison for the murder of White and a police officer. White was one of King Von's closest friends. Years later, Von mentioned him in his song Demon, saying that when White got shot, Von was inside a store while his friend was waiting outside, and that's when he was killed. Von said that White's death changed him forever and turned him into a demon. King Von returned to Twitter and said that he and T.Roy would soon take revenge for their brother. 2 months after White's death, a guy named Model, who lived in the STL area, claimed he was the one who shot White, trying to gain street fame with that statement. But one day, while Model was walking down the street with his friend, someone opened fire on them. Both were shot. Model died on the spot, and his friend survived but lost the ability to walk for the rest of his life. For this murder, 2 people, T.Roy and King Von, were arrested. But after 3 weeks, both were released due to a lack of sufficient evidence to charge them. King Von and T.Roy quickly returned to Twitter, talking about how they carried out a killing and saying they couldn't stop. They told their followers to wait for the next one. Years after King Von's death, in 2022, an anonymous person testified in court that King Von was the one who killed Modell. According to the testimony, Von targeted him because Modell was trying to get street fame by bragging about White's death, who was Von's close friend. On November 8, 2012, Boss Trell, a member of STL, was found dead with a gun tucked into his waistband. The shooting happened right in front of his house, shortly after he had replied "back to sleep" to King Von on Twitter. No witnesses were able to identify the shooter, and the case remained unsolved at the time. Only one woman told the police that she saw a short, skinny black man wearing a white jacket, black pants and brown boots running away from the scene through her window. At 8 a.m. the next morning, FBG Cash posted a photo announcing that Boss Trell had passed away in the hospital. Right after FBG Cash's tweet, T.Roy and King Von started tweeting. T.Roy replied to Trell's tweet with "Jut man down," and Von responded with "low." T.Roy tweeted again, "Da struggle," and King Von replied, "Ain't dying on time." T.Roy tweeted, "Boss stay alive." After those mocking tweets, the website WBS Chicago reported that Boss Trell had reserved a ticket to leave Chicago, but he hadn't paid for it yet, because he felt his life was in danger. Many people believed that Boss Trell was the one who killed T.Roy, a member of O Block. After Trell's death, all eyes turned toward King Von and T.Roy. T.Roy went even further. He posted a photo on Twitter of his bloody boots, then deleted it shortly after. A month later, J Money, a member of O Block, was killed in retaliation for the death of Boss Trell. Trell's death was such a huge loss for STL that even FBG Cash mentioned him in one of his tracks, honoring his memory. On November 19, 2012, James, a member of the Gangster Disciples, was shot and killed. According to the police report, 4 men approached him in front of a building and shot him in the chest. King Von started tweeting after the incident, and in one of his tweets he even said that he was out here killing GDs. Everyone believed that Von had a deleted channel, where he openly said he killed 5 GDs and shot at 10 people. T.Roy then went on Twitter and, pretending to be surprised, said, "Someone got shot yesterday." As always, those tweets were meant to mock their rivals. Eventually, King Von was arrested for illegal possession of a firearm. He spent a year behind bars, leaving T.Roy without his close partner on the streets for a while, but that didn't stop T.Roy. Around that time, Stunner, a member of TTB, a gang based near Washington Park and allies of the GDs, came into the picture. Stunner started rapping in 2011 and over the years released many diss tracks aimed at his rivals, especially O Block. On June 9, 2013, around 1 a.m., Stunner was sitting in a car with his girlfriend stuck in traffic. Another car pulled up next to them and opened fire. Stunner and his girlfriend were rushed to the hospital, but both died the next day from their injuries. That same day, T.Roy posted several indirect tweets about Stunner's death. Members of TTB took the incident very seriously and strongly believed that the shooting came from O Block, especially pointing the finger at T.Roy. TTB Nez even directly blamed T.Roy for the shooting. He mocked T.Roy's short height on social media, saying things like he would have a small grave. As mentioned earlier, there was no direct reaction from T.Roy or O Block at first. Only members of TTB were openly blaming them. But then, T.Roy posted a video holding a gun, mocking the death of Stunner, which made the situation even more serious and deepened the tension between the two sides. On September 18, 2013, T.Roy was arrested for no clear reason. He was quickly released. It was one of those arrests where you're just brought in to answer some questions. By then, King Von had already been released earlier, and the old O Block duo was finally back together again. Members of O Block had been looking for J Money's killer for a long time. Eventually, rumors began pointing toward Gakira Barnes, better known as K.I., K.I. took the first step and warned T.Roy, telling him that if he came to Vernon, he would be killed. But not long after, news broke that K.I. herself had been shot and killed, a death that many people in the streets believed was tied to King Von, marking his return to the streets after getting out of jail. The duo of T.Roy and King Von had just reunited when the shocking news of L.A. Capone's death broke out. L.A. Capone was one of the most influential and charismatic young artists to emerge from the Chicago scene at that time. His death hit the city hard. Many people in the streets believed the shooting came from members of Young Money. In March 2014, Lil Marc, one of the biggest rappers from Young Money, released a diss track called No Competition. The song was a heavy diss aimed at O-Block and all the different sets of the Black Disciples, directly calling them out and intensifying the beef between the groups. No Competition was also a direct response to Lil Durk's track, Competition. But unlike Durk's song, Lil Marc's diss carried a much harsher and more disrespectful tone, which is why it quickly spread and got attention all across Chicago, escalating the tension even further between Young Money and O-Block. On March 28th, just a few days after the release of No Competition, Lil Marc was standing in front of a bus stop on 53rd Street when a silver van pulled up. Someone got out of the van and shot him in the head. Lil Marc died on the spot. The moment of his fall after the shooting was captured, and that image became one of the most infamous and well-known scenes in Chicago's street history. Members of 051 were determined to get revenge, while T.Roy and King Von started mocking the death of Lil Marc online. At first, there was no solid evidence linking anyone to the shooting, but then a video surfaced showing T.Roy, Von, and another friend driving past the exact bus stop just moments after Lil Marc was killed. Lil Marc's death wasn't the end of the story. His diss track No Competition made him one of the most hated figures among the Black Disciples. Even years after his death, BD members continued to diss his name in songs and online, keeping the feud alive. The case of his murder remains officially unsolved to this day. The police never found enough solid evidence to charge anyone, and the file is still considered open. But within the streets, members of the GDs already knew exactly who they wanted to target for revenge. From 2014 onward, the trio of King Von, T.Roy, and D. Rose were repeatedly arrested and released in a short period of time for various incidents. In one of these cases, King Von got caught up for the murders of Gakira Barnes, K.I., and Malcolm Stuckey. About 3 months later, D. Rose was arrested and later convicted for the murder of Wenzel Richardson. As mentioned earlier, Lil Marc's death took away a major figure from the GDs, and they were determined to find a big target for revenge. In 2015, T.Roy was arrested for weapons possession and for being involved in a street altercation that, fortunately, didn't result in any deaths. He ended up serving time and remained behind bars until early 2016, temporarily taking him off the streets during a very tense period between O-Block and their rivals. During that time, O-Block suffered another major loss. Big A, who was both a close friend and childhood neighbor of T.Roy, was killed. This loss hit T.Roy hard, and in 2016 he returned to the streets with one goal in mind: revenge. At that moment, King Von was still in jail. There were strong rumors in the streets that T.Roy was hunting for TB, because many people believed TB was the one who killed Big A. After Big A's death, TB was often seen taking pictures in front of the store where the shooting happened, bragging and saying things like, "This my block now." At around 11:50, T.Roy was out on the streets looking for TB. According to surveillance footage, 2 men were following T.Roy and his friend at the same time. After T.Roy and his friend entered a store, those 2 men approached. One of them, wearing a mask later identified as TB, walked up close to T.Roy and shot him in the chest, then ran out of the store. T.Roy's friend chased after him. Meanwhile, T.Roy dragged himself toward the cash register, trying to hold on. When police arrived, they even found his gun hidden under the counter. T.Roy lost a massive amount of blood from the gunshot wound, and before the paramedics could arrive, he died inside the store. Witnesses said his body had completely tightened up from the trauma. After his death, members of the gangster disciples mocked him cruelly, making jokes online and saying things like, "T.Roy turned into a t-shirt," T.Roy's death deeply shook everyone in O-Block, especially King Von. Losing his best friend hit him hard. Right around that time, FBG Duck went live on social media and mocked T.Roy's death, laughing and making disrespectful remarks. During the same live, his brother FBG Brick claimed that he was the one who gave T.Roy's location to the shooters, specifically to TB. After T.Roy's death, his younger brother HK took revenge by allegedly being involved in the killings of FBG Brick and TB, two people closely tied to T.Roy's murder. Later on, King Von would also seek revenge in his own way, being tied to the killing of FBG Duck, a major figure and one of the loudest voices on the opposite side. After taking revenge for his brother's death, HK was later shot during a confrontation. Several bullets hit his leg, and despite being rushed for medical help, he died from his injuries. This marked the end of another key figure tied to O-Block's violent history. T.Roy's story remains one of the most infamous in Chicago's street wars. He was considered one of the most dangerous and feared members of O-Block, and a close partner of King Von in what many have described as a long and deadly cycle of retaliations and street violence that shaped an entire era of Chicago's drill scene.